I worked for NASA's secret division until we found evidence of God's presence on a dead world. Before I say anything else, I need you to do something for me, right now. Don't wait until the end of this story. Comment below where you're listening from. Your bedroom, your car, at work with headphones in, on a night walk, doesn't matter. Just tell me. Because if this video disappears in the next 48 hours, if my account goes dark, if suddenly there's nothing here but a blank page saying content removed, at least I'll know that somebody, somewhere, heard what I'm about to tell you. At least I'll know I didn't die for nothing. And make no mistake, I'm probably going to die. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. They don't let people like me just walk away with what I know. My name is David Mitchell. I'm 38 years old. Up until 6 months ago, I had a normal life. Well, as normal as it gets for a former Air Force captain turned aerospace engineer. I had an apartment in Albuquerque, a cat named Tesla, student loans I was still paying off, and an ex-wife who occasionally texted me about dividing up our old furniture. I went to work, came home, watched Netflix, ordered too much takeout. I was nobody special, just another guy in a long line of guys who studied physics, loved space, and dreamed about touching the stars one day. The most exciting thing in my life was when SpaceX launched something new, and I could pretend for a moment that I was part of humanity's future in space. But 6 months ago, everything changed. I got recruited into something that wasn't supposed to exist, a division of NASA that doesn't appear on any organizational chart, doesn't have a website, doesn't have a Wikipedia page, a place where they send the scientists who are willing to look at things the government doesn't want the public to know about. And what we found out there, on a dead moon circling Saturn, it didn't just change my understanding of the universe. It shattered everything I thought I knew about humanity, about religion, about whether we're alone, about whether we've ever been alone. I'm recording this in a motel room somewhere in rural Nevada. I'm not going to tell you exactly where because they're looking for me, and I don't want anyone who helps me to end up disappearing too. The walls here are thin. I can hear a couple arguing next door and a TV playing some late-night infomercial. Normal sounds. Human sounds. It's almost funny how normal everything seems when you know what I know now, when you've seen what I've seen. I've got a laptop, a USB drive with encrypted files that could rewrite human history, and maybe 48 hours before they find me. That's how long my contact at the agency said I had, maybe less. You're probably thinking this is fake, some creative writing exercise, some ARG or creepypasta bullshit designed to get views and likes. I get it. I would have thought the same thing a year ago. I was the skeptic in every room, the guy who rolled his eyes at UFO documentaries and alien conspiracy theories. I believed in science, in data, in peer-reviewed research. I believed that the universe was vast and strange, sure, but ultimately explainable, ultimately rational. God was a fairy tale we told ourselves to feel less alone in the dark. That's what I believed. Here's the thing though, right now, as I'm recording this, my hands are shaking. Not because I'm cold, not because I'm scared, though I am terrified, but because I'm looking at an image on my screen, an image I stole from a NASA server before they locked me out. And even now, even after seeing it 100 times, it makes my skin crawl. It makes something deep in my primitive brain start screaming. Because what's in this image shouldn't exist, can't exist, not naturally, not by accident, not without someone, something, putting it there deliberately, and whoever or whatever did it knew about humanity before we even existed. I've got 8, maybe 9 paragraphs left before I need to move to the next part of this story, and I'm already losing my nerve. Part of me wants to delete this recording and run, get in my car and drive until I hit the ocean and then just disappear into some small coastal town where nobody knows my name. But I can't, because if I don't tell someone what NASA found, what they're hiding, then I'm no different than them. And in 3 months, when the countdown hits 0, when whatever's coming finally arrives, at least some people will have had a warning. At least some people will have known the truth. They're going to call me crazy. The people who used to be my colleagues, my friends, they're going to go on camera and say I had a breakdown, that the stress of classified work got to me, that I started seeing patterns that weren't there, making connections that didn't exist. They'll say I was always unstable, that there were signs, that I should never have been cleared for this level of work. And maybe they're right. Maybe I did lose my mind. Maybe when you stare at data from the edge of the solar system for long enough, your brain starts inventing meaning where there is none. But I've got the files. I've got the images. I've got the recordings of frequencies we translated from a dead world that should be silent. There's a car outside. I can hear it idling. I've been hearing it for the last 10 minutes and it hasn't moved. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just someone sitting in their car, scrolling through their phone before going into their room. Or maybe they found me faster than I thought they would. Maybe I don't have 48 hours. Maybe I've got 48 minutes. So I'm going to talk fast. I'm going to tell you everything, exactly the way it happened. And if I disappear halfway through, if this recording cuts off suddenly, you'll know why. You'll know I was telling the truth. So comment below. Tell me you were here. Tell me you heard this. Because in about 5 minutes, I'm going to start explaining how I ended up working for a NASA division that isn't supposed to exist. How we found something on a moon that isn't on any map. How we discovered that every religion humanity has ever believed in, every god we've ever prayed to, every sacred text we've ever written, was documented somewhere in our solar system millions of years before humans could write, before humans could think, before humans existed, and how that discovery came with a countdown that's about to hit 0. Stay with me. This is going to sound insane, but I promise you, every word is true. Okay, the car outside moved. False alarm. My heart's still pounding, but I need to keep going. Let me tell you who I was before all of this happened, because it matters. It matters that I wasn't some conspiracy theorist living in my mom's basement. I wasn't the guy who believed in ancient aliens or thought the moon landing was faked. I was the exact opposite. I was the guy who made fun of those people. I was Air Force, then aerospace engineering, then NASA-adjacent work. My entire adult life was built on logic, on mathematics, on provable facts. So when I tell you what I'm about to tell you, understand that it's coming from someone who spent 38 years not believing in any of this shit. I grew up in Ohio, middle-class family. Dad was an accountant, mom was a teacher. Normal childhood. I wasn't abused, wasn't traumatized, didn't have some religious awakening or near-death experience that made me susceptible to seeing things that aren't there. I was good at math and science, really good. Got a scholarship to MIT for aerospace engineering. That's where the Air Force found me, recruited me right out of college. I was 22 years old, and they were offering to pay off my remaining student loans if I gave them 8 years. Seemed like a good deal at the time, and honestly, it was. I got to work on some incredible projects. Classified stuff I still can't talk about even now, even with everything else I'm about to reveal. The Air Force sent me to Afghanistan in 2012. I was there for 14 months, working on drone systems and satellite communications at Bagram Airfield. I saw people die. Not in combat. I was never in direct firefight, but I saw the aftermath. I saw what an IED does to a Humvee. I saw flag-draped coffins being loaded onto transport planes. I saw a chaplain trying to comfort a 19-year-old kid who just lost his best friend, and I remember thinking how empty those words sounded. How the promise of heaven seemed like such a convenient lie we tell ourselves to make death less terrifying. I didn't believe in God then. I believed in physics, in cause and effect, in the cold, indifferent machinery of the universe. When I got back stateside, I finished my service and transitioned to civilian aerospace work. Got hired by a defense contractor in New Mexico working on propulsion systems. Met my wife, Sarah, at a work conference in 2016. She was a project manager for Lockheed Martin. Smart, beautiful, way out of my league. We got married too fast, bought a house we couldn't really afford, adopted a cat, did all the things you're supposed to do. For a while it was good. For a while I thought maybe I'd figured out this whole adult life thing. But the job was demanding. I was traveling constantly. And somewhere along the way we stopped being a team and started being roommates who occasionally had sex and argued about whose turn it was to clean the litter box. We divorced in 2019. It was amicable, as much as these things can be. No kids, thank God. Just divided up the furniture, sold the house at a loss, and went our separate ways. She moved to California for a better job. I stayed in Albuquerque because, honestly, I didn't have the energy to start over somewhere new. I got an apartment, kept the cat, buried myself in work. My life became this predictable routine. Wake up, go to the gym, work 9 hours, come home, eat something microwavable, watch YouTube videos about space exploration, fall asleep on the couch. Weekends, I'd hike in the Sandia Mountains or drive out to Very Large Array and just stare at those massive radio telescopes and feel simultaneously insignificant and amazed that humans built something like that. I was lonely, but I told myself I was fine. I had work, I had hobbies, I had my cat who judged me silently while I explained orbital mechanics to him. I was still paying off student loans even though I was making decent money, because apparently MIT-level education costs about the same as a house. I had a 401k, health insurance, a gym membership I actually used. I was a functional, reasonably successful adult. And I didn't believe in anything I couldn't measure or test. God, the afterlife, the soul, all of that was just neurochemistry and evolutionary psychology. When you died, you stopped. The lights went out. There was no judgment, no pearly gates, no reincarnation. Just the same nothingness that existed before you were born. That worldview, that absolute certainty in a godless, purposeless universe. It made life simpler in a way. There was no divine plan, no destiny, no cosmic meaning. We were biological machines that evolved on a random planet orbiting an average star in an unremarkable galaxy. We invented meaning because our brains were wired to find patterns and purpose, but ultimately the universe didn't care about us. It didn't care about anything. Stars exploded, planets formed, life emerged and went extinct, and it was all just physics playing out according to laws that existed long before consciousness did. That was comforting to me. It meant I wasn't being judged. It meant there were no consequences beyond the ones I'd face in this life. It meant I was free. My friends from the Air Force, the ones who stayed in, they'd try to get me to come to their churches or their Bible studies. "You've got a God-shaped hole in your heart, Mitchell," they'd say. I'd smile and change the subject. My mom would ask on phone calls if I'd been to any services lately, if I'd maybe tried finding a nice church in Albuquerque. I'd tell her I was busy with work. She'd sigh, that disappointed mom, sigh that makes you feel like you're 12 again. But I never budged. I never felt like I was missing something. I felt like I'd figured out the truth that most people were too afraid to accept. We're alone. We're temporary. And when it's over, it's just over. I remember exactly where I was 6 months ago when everything I just told you stopped being true. When my entire framework for understanding reality got shattered into pieces so small, I'm still finding shards of it in my psyche. I was in my apartment. It was a Tuesday night. I'd just finished reheating some leftover Chinese food, and I was watching a documentary about the Voyager probes. Tesla was on my lap, purring. It was 9:47 p.m. I remember because I checked my phone when someone knocked on my door, which was weird because nobody ever knocked on my door. I had a doorbell. Everyone used the doorbell. But this was knocking. Deliberate. Official. The kind of knocking that means someone isn't asking permission to come in. They're announcing their arrival. I opened the door, and there were 2 men in dark suits standing in my apartment hallway. Not FBI, not CIA. I'd worked with enough government agencies to recognize the vibe. These guys were something else, something more classified. They showed me credentials that said NASA, but with a designation I'd never seen before. And one of them, the older one with gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen things that kept him up at night, he said, "Captain Mitchell, we have a job offer for you. One that doesn't officially exist. One that pays extremely well. And one that, if you accept, will change everything you think you know about the universe." I should have closed the door. I should have told them to fuck off, but I didn't. Because deep down, in that part of me that still dreamed about touching the stars, I wanted to know what they'd found. And that curiosity, that need to know, is exactly what they were counting on. So there I was, standing in my doorway in sweatpants and a faded Air Force t-shirt, with leftover Kung Pao chicken getting cold on my coffee table, staring at 2 men who looked like they'd stepped out of a Men in Black movie. Except this wasn't a movie. This was my life. My boring, predictable life suddenly getting invaded by whatever the hell this was. The older guy, the one with the gray hair, his name was Dr. Richard Graves. I'll never forget that name because of how perfectly it fit what was about to happen to my old life. It was about to be buried. The younger guy never gave me his name. Never spoke, actually. Just stood there with his hand near his jacket in a way that suggested he was armed and knew how to use whatever he was carrying. Dr. Graves smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Can we come in, Captain Mitchell? What we need to discuss isn't appropriate for a hallway conversation." I let them in. I don't know why. Maybe because I was curious. Maybe because when someone from NASA shows up at your door at night, you don't just slam it in their face. Maybe because I was lonely and bored and some fucked up part of me wanted something, anything, to break up the monotony. They sat on my couch. The younger guy kept looking around my apartment like he was cataloging everything, memorizing exits, assessing threats. Dr. Graves folded his hands in his lap and looked at me with this expression that was part sympathy, part calculation. "You've never heard of the Deep Space Reconnaissance Unit," he said. It wasn't a question. "That's correct. You've never heard of it because it doesn't exist in any official capacity. It's not on NASA's organizational charts. It doesn't have congressional oversight. It doesn't appear in any budget that the public has access to. As far as 99.9% of NASA employees know, it's not real. But it is real," I said. My mouth was dry. I could feel my heart rate picking up. This was either the most elaborate prank in history, or I was about to step into something that would change everything. Dr. Graves nodded slowly. "Very real. It was created in 1983 after we received our first confirmed anomalous signal from deep space. Not the wow signal. That was something different, something innocent. This was deliberate. This was structured. This was impossible to explain with known astrophysics. And when you find something like that, something that suggests we're not alone, and that whatever's out there is more advanced than us by orders of magnitude, you have two choices. You either tell the public and risk mass panic, religious upheaval, and societal collapse, or you create a division that studies it in secret. We chose option 2. He paused, watching my face for a reaction. I tried to keep it neutral, but I could feel the skepticism written all over it. "Why me?" I asked. It was the obvious question. I was nobody. Just a divorced engineer with a cat and student loan debt. Dr. Graves pulled out a tablet from his briefcase and swiped through what looked like my entire life history. "You have a top-secret clearance from your Air Force days. You've worked on classified propulsion systems. You have a doctorate in aerospace engineering with a specialty in orbital mechanics. You've never had a drug problem, never been arrested, never posted anything controversial on social media. You're psychologically stable, according to your military psych evals. And most importantly, Captain Mitchell, you don't believe in God. That last one is crucial. We need people who won't have a faith crisis when they see what we're going to show them. We need rational minds that can process the impossible without breaking." The younger guy finally spoke. His voice was flat, emotionless. "We've been monitoring you for 3 months. You were one of 17 candidates for this position. The others have either been recruited, rejected, or disqualified themselves through behavioral red flags. You're the last one we're approaching for this cycle. That should have scared me. Should have made me tell them to get the fuck out of my apartment. But instead I felt this weird validation. They'd been watching me, and I'd passed some test I didn't even know I was taking. What exactly would I be doing?" I asked. Dr. Graves smiled again, and this time there was something predatory in it. "You'd be analyzing data from our deep space observation network. Signals, images, telemetry from probes that the public doesn't know exist. Your job would be to find patterns, identify anomalies, and help us understand what we're seeing. We've recently detected something that defies all conventional explanation, and we need the best minds we can find to make sense of it. And the compensation?" I tried to sound casual, but my voice cracked slightly. I was still paying off $73,000 in student loans. My rent was $1,400 a month. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. Dr. Graves didn't blink. $500,000 per year, tax-free, deposited into an offshore account of your choosing. "We'll also pay off all your outstanding debts immediately upon acceptance. Student loans, credit cards, that medical bill from when you broke your wrist last year, all of it gone. In exchange, you relocate to our facility, you live on site for the duration of your contract, and you don't contact anyone from your previous life except through approved channels. No social media, no phone calls that aren't monitored, no emails that aren't encrypted and reviewed. You essentially disappear for a while. $500,000 a year, tax-free, plus debt elimination. I did the math in my head. Even 1 year of this would set me up for life. I could quit after a year, invest the money properly, and never have to work again unless I wanted to. But there was a catch. There's always a catch. "What's the duration of the contract?" I asked. Dr. Graves glanced at the younger guy, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Minimum 1-year commitment. Maximum? Well, that depends on what we find. Some people stay for decades. Some people can't handle it and request termination of their contract after a few months. If you leave, you're subject to a non-disclosure agreement that's enforced by methods I'm not at liberty to discuss, but I assure you, you'll take this secret to your grave, one way or another." The younger guy's hand moved closer to his jacket. The message was clear. This wasn't just a job offer. This was a life-altering decision with permanent consequences. I should have said no. I should have recognized all the red flags. secret government division with no oversight, NDAs enforced by implied violence, complete isolation from my previous life. This was every conspiracy theory warning sign rolled into one package. But I looked around my shitty apartment with its secondhand furniture and stack of unpaid bills on the counter. I thought about my ex-wife living her best life in California while I microwaved Chinese food and talked to my cat. I thought about spending the rest of my life working for defense contractors, designing missiles and satellites, never actually touching space, never actually contributing to anything that mattered. And I thought about what Dr. Graves had said, something that defies all conventional explanation, something impossible. My entire life I'd been chasing the unknown, the edge of human knowledge, and here it was being offered to me on a silver platter wrapped in secrecy and threats. I need to think about it, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew I was already in. Dr. Graves stood up, buttoning his jacket. You have 24 hours. Here's a number. He handed me a card with nothing on it but a phone number. Call it if you accept. Don't call it if you decline, and we'll never contact you again. But understand this, Captain Mitchell. What we're working on, what we've found, it's the most important discovery in human history. It will rewrite everything we think we know about our place in the universe. You can either be part of that, or you can spend the rest of your life wondering what you missed out on. They left, just walked out of my apartment like they'd never been there. I stood in my living room, holding that card, listening to Tesla purr, and feeling like I'd just been offered a deal with the devil. Except, I didn't believe in the devil. I didn't believe in anything supernatural or divine. I believed in data and evidence and the scientific method. 24 hours. I spent the first 12 pacing my apartment, Googling Deep Space Reconnaissance Unit, and finding nothing, absolutely nothing. I called 2 friends from my Air Force days who'd gone on to work in intelligence. Neither had ever heard of DSRU. One of them told me it sounded like a scam and I should report it to the FBI. The other one got quiet on the phone and told me if someone from a division I'd never heard of was offering me that much money, I should take it and not ask questions. I didn't sleep that night, just sat on my couch, staring at that card, running through scenarios. Best case, this was legitimate and I'd be working on something groundbreaking. Worst case, this was some elaborate human trafficking scheme or I'd end up disappeared in a black site somewhere. But that younger guy had said they'd been monitoring me for 3 months. They knew everything about me. If they wanted to disappear me, they could have done it already. At 9:47 p.m. the next night, exactly 24 hours after they'd knocked on my door, I called the number. Dr. Graves answered on the first ring. Captain Mitchell, I'm pleased you're calling. I'm in, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, like I was listening to someone else make this decision. But I need to know one thing. What did you find out there? What's so important that it requires all this secrecy? There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, considering how much to tell me. Finally, he spoke, and his voice had lost all its earlier warmth. It was cold now, clinical. We found proof that we're being watched, Captain Mitchell, and we've been being watched for a very, very long time, long before humans existed. Whatever's out there, it knows about us. It's documented us, and in 3 months, based on our calculations, it's coming back. The line went dead. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, my hand shaking, thinking about what I'd just agreed to. 48 hours later, I was on an unmarked plane heading to a location I wasn't told, leaving behind everything I knew, everything I was, to become part of something I couldn't begin to comprehend. That was 6 months ago. And now I'm sitting in this motel room, running for my life, trying to tell you what we found before they silence me permanently. The plane landed somewhere in the New Mexico desert. I say somewhere because they made me wear a hood for the last hour of the flight. Not a bag over my head like you see in movies, but a comfortable black hood that blocked out all light. I could still breathe fine, could still hear the engine noise, but I had no idea where we were going. When they finally removed it, we were inside a hangar that looked like it hadn't been used since the Cold War. Corrugated metal walls, oil stains on the concrete floor, the smell of jet fuel and dust. There was no signage, no identification markers, nothing that would tell you what this place was. Just empty desert as far as I could see through the hangar doors, and heat waves rising off the tarmac. Dr. Graves was there waiting for me with 2 security personnel who looked like they ate nails for breakfast. Welcome to Site 77, he said, shaking my hand. This is where your new life begins, Captain Mitchell, and where your old life ends. They drove me in a windowless van for what felt like 20 minutes but could have been an hour. I lost all sense of direction. When the van finally stopped and the doors opened, I expected to see some futuristic facility, gleaming white corridors, high-tech everything. Instead, I saw what looked like an abandoned mining operation, old industrial buildings, rusted equipment, a few trucks that looked like they hadn't run in decades. "This is the surface installation," Dr. I. Graves explained, seeing my confusion. "It's meant to look abandoned. Satellite imagery shows nothing active here. If anyone gets curious and drives out this far, which they won't because we own 200 square miles in every direction, they'll see an old closed-down mining site. Nothing suspicious, nothing worth investigating." He led me toward what looked like a supply shed. Inside was an industrial elevator, the kind you see in mines, all metal grating and exposed cables. The real facility is 400 feet underground, built in 1987 using funds diverted from SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, Reagan's Star Wars program. Most of that money went to missile defense research, but a small percentage got redirected here. To study something that made nuclear war seem like a minor concern. The elevator ride down felt like descending into hell, not because of the depth, but because of what I was descending into. A world of secrets that most of humanity would never know existed. The temperature dropped as we went deeper. My ears popped. The elevator creaked and groaned like it might give out at any second. Dr. Graves stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the metal wall like he'd made this trip 1,000 times and was bored by it. When the doors finally opened, I stepped into something that looked like a cross between a research laboratory and a military bunker. Concrete walls reinforced with steel beams, fluorescent lights that gave everything a sickly, greenish tint, the hum of ventilation systems and computer servers, and doors. So many doors, each one requiring a keycard and biometric scan. This wasn't just secure. This was beyond secure. This was a place designed to keep secrets even from the people who worked here. "Your clearance level is cosmic," Dr. Graves said as we walked through corridor after corridor. "You've never heard of it because it's above top secret, above SCI, above everything the normal intelligence community uses. There are maybe 300 people in the entire world with cosmic clearance, and most of them don't know about each other. With this clearance, you have access to information that could destabilize governments, collapse religions, and fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. You also have a target on your back for the rest of your life. Foreign intelligence services would kill for what you're about to learn. Domestic extremist groups would kill you for knowing it. And if you ever violate your NDA, your own government will kill you. Not arrest you, not prosecute you, kill you. Do you understand?" I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. He stopped in front of a reinforced door with a biometric scanner. "Good, because you're about to meet the team. These are the finest scientific minds I could assemble. Every one of them has a background in military intelligence or classified research. Every one of them signed the same NDA you're about to sign, and every one of them has seen things that changed them fundamentally." The room beyond the door was a conference room that looked like it belonged in a corporate office, not 400 feet underground in a secret government bunker. There was a long table, comfortable chairs, a coffee maker in the corner, even some sad-looking potted plants trying to survive under artificial light. Sitting around the table were 12 people, 6 men, 6 women, ages ranging from late 20s to early 60s. All of them looked tired, not just physically tired, but existentially tired. The kind of tired you get when you've been carrying weight that's too heavy for too long. Dr. Graves introduced me. "Everyone, this is Captain David Mitchell, aerospace engineer, former Air Force, our new orbital mechanics specialist. Captain, meet the team." He went around the table. Dr. Sarah Chen, astrophysicist from Caltech, former Navy intelligence. Dr. James Morrison, linguist specializing in dead languages, former Army cryptanalyst. Dr. Rebecca Torres, quantum physicist, former NSA. The names and credentials blurred together. What struck me was their eyes. Every single person in that room had the same look, the look of someone who'd seen something they couldn't unsee. After introductions, Dr. Graves placed a tablet in front of me. On the screen was a document labeled Non-Disclosure Agreement, Cosmic Level, Deep Space Reconnaissance Unit. I started reading. The language was dense, full of legalese, but certain phrases jumped out. Acknowledge that disclosure of classified information will result in immediate termination of contract and neutralization of security risk. Neutralization, not prosecution, not imprisonment. Neutralization, the same word you'd use for disposing of chemical waste or eliminating a threat. Waive all rights to due process in matters relating to security violations. Consent to continuous surveillance and monitoring for the duration of contract and extending indefinitely post-contract. Acknowledge that disappearance or death may occur as a result of security measures and that no legal recourse will be available to next of kin. I looked up at Dr. Graves. This is essentially a death warrant if I talk. He didn't blink. It's insurance. We've never had to use it. Everyone who signs this document understands the gravity of what they're being trusted with. They understand that some secrets are too dangerous to share. Sign it or don't, Captain Mitchell. But if you don't sign it, you're getting back in that elevator, and you'll never know what we found out there in the dark. I signed it. I wish I could tell you, I hesitated longer, that I really considered walking away, but I didn't. I wanted to know. That curiosity, that need to understand, it overrode every survival instinct I had. I signed my name on that tablet, and the moment I did, something in the room changed. The team members relaxed slightly. Dr. Graves smiled. Welcome to DSRU, Captain Mitchell. Let me show you why you're here. He dimmed the lights and activated a holographic projector in the center of the table. An image appeared, floating in 3 dimensions above the table's surface. It was a celestial body, a moon, based on the cratering and lack of atmosphere. But something was wrong with it. There were patterns on its surface, geometric patterns, massive shapes carved or built into the moon's crust, each one hundreds of miles across. I leaned forward, my engineer's brain trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This is object Saturn Theta, Dr. Graves said quietly. Designation ST-01, a moon we discovered orbiting Saturn in an orbit that shouldn't be stable. It's roughly the size of Enceladus, but its composition is wrong. Its orbit is wrong. Everything about it is wrong. Dr. Chen spoke up, her voice carrying a slight tremor. We've been studying ST-01 for 7 years. It was discovered by a classified probe we sent to the Saturn system in 2018. At first, we thought it was just another captured asteroid, something that got caught in Saturn's gravity well. But when we got high-resolution imagery, we found these. She gestured to the patterns on the hologram. Up close, they were even more disturbing. Perfect geometric shapes, circles within squares, within triangles, and inside those shapes, more detailed patterns that looked almost like circuitry or writing. These aren't natural formations, Dr. Morrison added. Natural processes don't create perfect mathematical ratios. They don't create patterns that repeat across an entire planetary body. Whatever made these marks did so deliberately. And based on the cratering analysis and radioactive decay measurements of the surrounding material, these marks are approximately 4.1 billion years old. That's older than complex life on Earth. Older than Earth's oceans. These marks were made when the solar system was still in its infancy. I stared at the hologram, my mind racing. Are you saying this is alien? Some kind of alien structure? Dr. Graves shook his head. That was our first assumption. But then we started analyzing the patterns more closely. Dr. Morrison, show him. The linguist tapped his tablet and the hologram zoomed in on one section of the patterns. As the resolution increased, I could see that the geometric shapes weren't random. They were symbols. And not just any symbols. I recognized some of them. A cross, a Star of David, a crescent moon, a wheel with 8 spokes. Oh my God, I whispered, then immediately felt stupid for saying it. Dr. Morrison's face was grim. Exactly, Captain Mitchell. These aren't alien symbols. These are human religious symbols. Every major religion that has ever existed on Earth is represented on this moon. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, ancient Egyptian religion, Norse mythology, Aztec, Mayan, Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime, all of them, carved into a moon that predates human civilization by billions of years. The room was completely silent, except for the hum of the ventilation system. I couldn't process what I was seeing. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. How is this possible? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Doctor. Graves leaned forward, his face illuminated by the hologram's glow. That's what we've been trying to figure out for 7 years, Captain Mitchell. How did human religious symbols, some of which weren't even invented until a few thousand years ago, end up on a moon that's been dead for billions of years? The only logical explanation is that whoever put them there knew about humanity's religions before we created them, before we existed, before our planet could even support life. He paused, letting that sink in. Someone or something has been watching us for a very long time, documenting us, recording every god we've ever believed in, every faith we've ever held. And 3 months ago, ST-01 started transmitting. That's why we brought you here. That's why we needed fresh eyes on this. Because whatever's on that moon, it's waking up, and we need to know what it's going to do when it does. I couldn't sleep that first night. They gave me quarters that were basically a college dorm room, 400 feet underground, with no windows and air that tasted recycled. I lay in that narrow bed staring at the concrete ceiling, my mind replaying what I'd seen in the conference room. Religious symbols, billions of years old, on a moon that shouldn't exist. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those patterns, those impossible geometric shapes that contained crosses and crescents and stars. My rational mind kept trying to find explanations. Maybe it was pareidolia, seeing patterns where none existed. Maybe the symbols weren't really religious icons, just shapes that happened to look similar. But I'd seen the high-resolution images. I'd seen Dr. Morrison's analysis. Those weren't coincidental shapes. Those were deliberate, precise recreations of human religious symbols. And that meant something had known about our religions before we did. Something had been watching us, documenting us, waiting. The next morning, Dr. Graves found me in the cafeteria, nursing what passed for coffee in this underground tomb. "Rough night?" he asked, sitting across from me. I must have looked like shit because he didn't wait for an answer. Everyone has a rough first night after the briefing. Dr. Chen didn't sleep for 3 days when she first saw ST-01. Dr. Morrison had a complete breakdown, locked himself in his quarters and had to be sedated. This information, what we're dealing with, it breaks something in your brain, the part that thought you understood reality. He sipped his own coffee, grimacing at the taste. But you'll adapt. You have to. Because today, we're going to show you everything. Every piece of data we have on ST-01, every analysis, every theory, every dead end we've hit. And then you're going to help us figure out what the hell it means. They took me to what they called the operations center. It was a large room filled with workstations, massive screens on every wall, and enough computing power to run a small country. The main screen dominated the far wall, easily 20 feet across, and on it was ST-01 in stunning detail. The moon rotated slowly, a three-dimensional model built from thousands of probe images stitched together. It was beautiful in a horrible way, gray and cratered like any dead moon, but covered in those patterns, those symbols, like someone had used the entire surface as a canvas for the most important message in human history. Dr. Chen stood at a control console, manipulating the image with hand gestures. Object Saturn Theta was discovered on March 17, 2019, she began, her voice taking on the tone of a professor giving a lecture she'd given 100 times before. By the classified probe Heimdall 7, which we deployed to the Saturn system under the cover of a routine Cassini follow-up mission that never officially happened. Saturn has 146 known moons, Dr. Chen continued, zooming the display out to show Saturn's full system. Most are tiny, irregular chunks of rock and ice, but we've catalogued all of them, mapped their orbits, understood their origins. ST-01 appeared on our scans in an orbit that made no sense. It sits at approximately 3 million kilometers from Saturn, beyond the orbit of Titan, in a region where gravitational perturbations from Jupiter should make any orbit unstable. But ST-01's orbit is perfectly stable, too stable. It's almost like it's locked in place by something other than gravity. She pulled up orbital mechanics data, numbers and equations that I understood intimately from my years studying aerospace engineering. And she was right. That orbit shouldn't work. The eccentricity was wrong. The inclination was wrong. Everything about it suggested this moon should have either crashed into Saturn or been flung out into deep space millions of years ago. But there it was, serenely orbiting, defying physics. Initial analysis suggested it was approximately 400 kilometers in diameter, Dr. Chen went on, roughly the same size as Mimas or Enceladus. Surface composition showed high concentrations of silicates and iron, unusual for a Saturnian moon but not impossible. Surface temperature averaged minus 180 Celsius, consistent with a dead world that far from the sun. No atmosphere, No volcanic activity, no signs of liquid water or cryovolcanism. By all measurable criteria, ST-01 was just another dead rock. She paused, her hand hovering over the controls. But then, we got the high-resolution surface imagery, and everything changed. The screen zoomed in, closer and closer, until we were looking at the surface details. And that's when I saw them clearly for the first time. Not just symbols, but structures. Massive, intricate structures carved into the moon's crust, each one a perfect geometric shape, containing layer upon layer of detail. These formations cover approximately 67% of ST-01's surface, Dr. Chen said quietly. The remaining 33% shows normal cratering patterns consistent with a 4-billion-year-old surface. But these marked areas, they show no cratering at all, as if they've been protected somehow. Dr. Morrison took over the briefing, pulling up close-up images of individual symbols. We've identified 247 distinct religious and spiritual symbols from human history represented on ST-01. Some are obvious, like the Christian cross, which appears in 89 different locations across the surface. Others are more obscure, like the Sumerian symbol for An, the god of heaven, or the Aboriginal Australian symbol for the rainbow serpent. But here's what keeps me awake at night. He pulled up a comparison chart showing symbols from ST-01 next to their earthly counterparts. These aren't approximations. These aren't close enough versions. These are pixel-perfect recreations. Whoever made these had access to the exact designs, down to the smallest detail. The Cross of Lorraine has the correct proportions. The Islamic calligraphy for Allah is in the precise script used in 7th century Arabia. The Hindu Om symbol includes decorative elements that didn't appear until the 12th century. How? How could anyone know these details before they existed? And it gets stranger, Dr. Morrison continued, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. We've found symbols for religions that died out millennia ago. The Minoan snake goddess, the Hittite storm god, Zoroastrian fire altars, even Proto-Indo-European symbols that we've only recently reconstructed through linguistic archaeology. But on ST-01, they're complete, detailed, perfect. It's like someone had a master catalog of every god, every faith, every spiritual belief system humanity would ever create, and they decided to carve them all into a moon 1 billion years before humans could even walk upright. He looked at me, with eyes that had seen too much. This isn't aliens, Captain Mitchell. Aliens would have their own symbols, their own gods. This is something that knows us, has always known us. Something that's been watching humanity's spiritual evolution since before we evolved. Then Dr. Graves activated another display, this one showing graphs and waveforms. 3 months ago, ST-01 started emitting radiation. Not a lot, not enough to be dangerous, but enough to be detected by our sensors. The emission follows a precise pattern. Every 7 days, exactly 168 hours apart, the entire moon pulses with electromagnetic energy across multiple spectrums. Visible light, ultraviolet, radio waves, even gamma radiation in trace amounts. Each pulse lasts for exactly 7 minutes and 7 seconds. The pattern never varies. It's been happening for 3 months now, 12 complete cycles, and it's like clockwork. This is not a natural phenomenon. Natural processes don't have that kind of precision. He overlaid the emission data onto the 3-dimensional model of ST-01, and I could see the pulses originating from specific points on the surface. Points that corresponded to the largest concentrations of symbols. The moon was lighting up like a Christmas tree, a dead world suddenly coming alive after billions of years of silence. We've tried to decode the emissions, Dr. Graves said, frustration evident in his voice. We've run them through every analysis algorithm we have. Pattern recognition, linguistic analysis, mathematical modeling, even musical notation on the off chance it's some kind of cosmic symphony. Nothing. It's just regular pulses of energy on a 7-day cycle. But it means something. It has to mean something. Things don't just start transmitting after 4 billion years of silence for no reason. He turned to look at me directly. And here's the part that terrifies us, Captain Mitchell. We've calculated the energy output of these pulses. They're increasing, not by much, just 0.3% per cycle, but it's a consistent increase. If this rate continues in approximately 90 days, the energy output will reach a critical threshold. We don't know what happens at that threshold. Maybe nothing. Maybe the pulses stop. Or maybe whatever's been dormant on that moon for billions of years finally wakes up completely. I stood there staring at the screen, watching this impossible moon slowly rotate, its surface covered in humanity's gods, pulsing with energy on a countdown we didn't understand. "You said this isn't natural," I finally said, my voice sounding strange in the quiet operations center. "And you said it's not alien the way we imagine aliens. So what is it? What are we actually looking at here?" Dr. Graves was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. "We think ST-01 is a library, Captain Mitchell, a repository of information. Someone or something has been documenting humanity's relationship with the divine for billions of years. Every god we've worshipped, every religion we've followed, every spiritual belief we've held, it's all there, carved into that moon. The question we can't answer is why. Why document our religions? Why preserve them on a dead world a billion miles from Earth? And why, after all this time, is it suddenly trying to communicate? What message could possibly be worth waiting 4 billion years to deliver?" The first 3 weeks underground became a blur of data. Coffee that tasted like battery acid, and sleep deprivation that made my eyes feel like they'd been rubbed with sandpaper. They assigned me a workstation in the operations center, a corner desk with 3 monitors and access to every piece of data DSRU had collected on ST-01, terabytes of imagery, spectral analysis, radiation measurements, orbital calculations. My job was simple in theory: find patterns, identify anomalies, help the team understand what they were looking at. But nothing about this was simple. Every time I thought I understood something, the data would contradict itself. Every time I found a pattern, it would break down under closer examination. ST-01 wasn't just defying physics, it was defying logic itself. And the more I studied it, the more I realized that everyone on this team was operating on the edge of sanity, held together by scientific discipline and the desperate need to understand what we were seeing. I started with the orbital mechanics because that's what I knew best. Numbers don't lie. Mathematics is universal. If there was something wrong with ST-01's orbit, I'd find it in the equations. I spent 5 days running simulations, building models, checking and rechecking the data from Heimdall 7, and Dr. Chen was right. The orbit was impossible. Not just improbable, impossible. The gravitational forces from Saturn, Jupiter, and the Sun should have destabilized ST-01's orbit within a few million years maximum. But according to the cratering analysis and radioactive decay measurements, this moon had been in this exact orbit for over 4 billion years. The only way that made sense was if something was actively maintaining the orbit. Some force or technology we couldn't detect was keeping ST-01 locked in place. I wrote up my findings, handed them to Dr. Graves, and watched his face as he read them. He didn't look surprised. He looked tired. "We know," he said simply. "We've known since year 1. ST-01 is being held in place artificially. We just don't know by what." After the orbital mechanics dead end, I shifted focus to the surface features, the symbols, the patterns, the massive structures carved into the moon's crust. Dr. Morrison had catalogued 247 distinct religious symbols, but I wanted to understand the scale we were dealing with. I pulled up the highest resolution images we had and started measuring. The Christian cross that appeared near ST-01's equator was 127 kilometers from top to bottom. Think about that, 127 kilometers. That's roughly the distance from New York City to Philadelphia, carved into solid rock with such precision that the edges were straight within a margin of error of less than 1 meter. The Star of David near the northern pole was 89 kilometers across. The Islamic crescent and star covered an area of over 15,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of the entire state of Connecticut. These weren't symbols. These were monuments, engineering projects on a scale that made the pyramids look like sandcastles. I spent an entire week just documenting the sizes and locations of the major symbols, creating a database that the team could reference. And that's when I noticed something that everyone else had somehow missed. The symbols weren't randomly distributed across ST-01's surface. They were organized, grouped by era and geographic origin. The Mesopotamian symbols, Sumerian and Babylonian and Akkadian, they were all clustered in one region near the northern pole. The Egyptian symbols occupied a massive swath of the equatorial region. Greek and Roman religious icons were grouped together on the eastern hemisphere. Hindu and Buddhist symbols dominated a large section of the southern pole. It was like looking at a map of human religious history, organized geographically and chronologically, carved into a moon that existed before humans had geography or chronology. Someone had arranged these symbols deliberately, creating a library organized by culture and time period. A library that predicted human history before it happened. The dating was what really broke my brain. We used multiple methods to estimate the age of these structures. Cratering analysis, measuring how many impact craters overlapped the carved areas versus the uncarved areas. Radioactive decay of isotopes in the surface material. Analysis of space weathering and micrometeorite erosion. Every method pointed to the same conclusion. These structures were approximately 4.1 billion years old, with a margin of error of plus or minus 200 million years. To put that in perspective, Earth is 4.5 billion years old. The oldest fossils of life on Earth, simple bacteria, date back about 3.5 billion years. Complex life didn't emerge until about 600 million years ago. Humans, modern Homo sapiens, have only existed for about 300,000 years. Civilization, writing, recorded history, that's all within the last 10,000 years. These symbols on ST-01 predated humanity by such an enormous span of time that it made my head hurt trying to conceptualize it. I remember the moment it really hit me. I was staring at a high-resolution image of the Christian cross, this massive structure carved into ancient rock, and I was looking at the cratering patterns around it. There were impact craters everywhere on ST-01's surface, evidence of billions of years of meteorite bombardment. But the areas where the symbols were carved showed significantly fewer craters, not zero, but maybe 30% of what you'd expect to see. It was as if these areas had been protected somehow, or cleared periodically, or were made of material that was more resistant to impacts. I ran the numbers through our crater counting algorithms, cross-referenced with the known meteorite flux in the Saturn system over geological time, and came to a conclusion that made my hands shake as I typed it into my report. These structures had been maintained. Someone or something had been taking care of them, preserving them, for billions of years. This wasn't an abandoned monument. This was an active archive. I brought my findings to the evening briefing. The whole team gathered in the conference room, everyone looking as exhausted and haunted as I felt. I pulled up my analysis on the main screen and walked them through it. The organization of symbols by culture and era, the massive scale of the structures, the age dating that put them billions of years before human existence, and finally, the cratering evidence that suggested ongoing maintenance. When I finished, the room was silent for almost a minute. Dr. Torres, the quantum physicist who rarely spoke in meetings, finally broke the silence. So you're saying something has been actively curating this collection for 4 billion years, updating it, adding new symbols as new religions emerged on Earth, maintaining the old ones even as they fell out of use. I nodded. That's what the data suggests. This isn't a snapshot. It's an ongoing project, a living archive. Dr. Morrison stood up, pacing the length of the conference room like a caged animal. Do you understand what you're saying, Mitchell? You're suggesting that something has been watching Earth, watching humanity, for the entire span of our existence and beyond. Something that knew what religions we would create before we created them. Something with the technology to carve continent-sized symbols into a moon, to maintain them for billions of years, to keep that moon in an impossible orbit. Something with that level of power and knowledge and patience. He stopped pacing and looked at me with eyes that had dark circles under them. That's not aliens, Mitchell. Aliens would have their own concerns, their own projects. This is something that's specifically focused on us, on our gods, on our relationship with the divine. This is something that cares about whether humans believe in a Christian God or Allah or Vishnu or the spirits of our ancestors. Why? Why would anything care about that? I didn't have an answer. None of us did. That was the fundamental question that had been eating at this team for 7 years. Why would any intelligence, any civilization, any entity spend billions of years documenting human religious belief? What possible purpose could it serve? Dr. Graves had been quiet during my presentation, but now he spoke, his voice heavy. There are only a few possibilities I can think of. None of them are comforting. Possibility 1, this is a test. We're being evaluated based on our spiritual development, and when the countdown reaches 0, we'll receive judgment. Possibility 2, this is a warning. Every religion we've created, every God we've believed in, has been documented as evidence for some future reckoning. Possibility 3, This is a museum. We're the exhibit, and something out there is cataloging us the way we catalog extinct species. Or possibility 4, the one that keeps me awake at night. This is a backup. These symbols, these religions, they're being preserved because someone knows Earth won't survive. They're saving our gods because they know we won't be around to worship them. The briefing broke up shortly after that. People went back to their workstations or their quarters, carrying the weight of those possibilities. I sat at my desk, staring at the image of STOI-1 on my monitor, watching it slowly rotate. 4 billion years old. Symbols of religions that wouldn't exist for billions of years after the moon was carved. Maintained and updated across geological epochs. An impossible archive of human divinity floating in the rings of Saturn. I zoomed in on the Christian cross again, traced its outline with my cursor. 127 kilometers of carved stone, straight edges, perfect proportions. Whoever made this had measured it precisely, had cared about getting it right, had wanted these symbols to be perfect, to be preserved, to last. But why? What message were they trying to send? What did they want us to know? And the question that terrified me most, when the countdown reached 0, when ST01 finished whatever sequence it had started 3 months ago, would we finally get our answer? Or would the answer be the last thing humanity ever heard? It was week 5 when Dr. Torres made the breakthrough that changed everything. I was at my workstation, running yet another analysis of the orbital decay rates, when I heard her voice cut through the usual hum of the operations center. Not loud, but sharp, urgent. "Everyone, stop what you're doing and come here, right now." The tone made my stomach drop. This wasn't excitement. This was fear. The kind of fear you hear in someone's voice when they've just found something they wish they could unsee. I abandoned my monitors and joined the rest of the team clustering around her workstation. On her screens were waveforms, spectral analysis charts, frequency data from the electromagnetic pulses ST01 had been emitting every 7 days. She'd been working on this data for weeks, trying to find meaning in what looked like random noise. Apparently, she'd found it. And from the look on her face, the paleness of her skin, the way her hands trembled slightly as they hovered over her keyboard, whatever she'd found had shaken her to her core. "I've been analyzing the emission patterns wrong," Dr. Torres said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We all have been. We've been treating them as energy signatures, as radiation, as physical phenomena to be measured and quantified. But they're not. They're not random pulses of electromagnetic energy. They're structured. They're encoded." She pulled up a new analysis, something I'd never seen before. A 3-dimensional representation of the emission data with layers upon layers of frequency modulation. I ran the emissions through a signal processing algorithm we use for deep space communication, looking for carrier waves, for any kind of modulation that might indicate deliberate encoding. And I found it. The emissions aren't just energy. They're information. Specifically, they're audio information. Sound waves encoded into electromagnetic radiation. ST01 isn't just transmitting, it's broadcasting. It's trying to talk to us. The room went completely silent. You could hear the ventilation system, the hum of computers, the sound of our own breathing. Dr. Graves stepped forward, his face unreadable. "You're certain?" Dr. Torres nodded. "I've checked it 17 times. The pattern is unmistakable once you know what you're looking for. This is a message. Has been since the first pulse 3 months ago." Dr. Graves didn't hesitate. "Play it. Now." Dr. Torres pulled up an audio file, her hand hovering over the play button. "I've converted the last emission, from 4 days ago, into audible sound. I don't know how to prepare you for this. Just listen." She pressed play. What came through the speakers wasn't the alien warble or electronic noise I expected. It was a voice, a human voice, or something so close to human that the difference was terrifying. Deep, resonant, speaking in a language I didn't recognize but somehow felt ancient. The words were measured, deliberate, each syllable pronounced with perfect clarity. It lasted for exactly 7 seconds, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. Dr. Morrison had gone completely white. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. Finally, he managed to speak, his voice cracking. "That's Aramaic, ancient Aramaic, the dialect spoken in Judea around the 1st century AD, the language Jesus would have spoken." He rewound the audio, played it again, his eyes closed as he listened. The words are, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The room erupted. Everyone talking at once, voices overlapping, some people standing, others sitting down hard like their legs had given out. Dr. Chen was shaking her head repeatedly, saying, "No, no, no," under her breath. Dr. Morrison was frantically pulling up texts on his tablet, cross-referencing something. I just stood there, frozen, because I recognized those words. Everyone who grew up even tangentially Christian would recognize them. That's the opening line of the Gospel of John, verse 1, chapter 1, one of the most famous passages in the Bible. And STO1, a moon that shouldn't exist, was broadcasting it in a dead language across the vacuum of space. Dr. Graves held up his hand for silence. It took almost a minute for everyone to calm down enough to hear him. Dr. Torres, you said you analyzed the last emission. What about the previous ones? The other 11 pulses we've recorded? Dr. Torres nodded, already pulling up more files. I've converted all 12. They're all the same structure. 7-second audio messages in various languages. All ancient, all dead languages, and all of them are... She paused, swallowing hard. All of them are religious texts. She played them one by one. The second emission was in Sanskrit, classical Sanskrit from around 500 BC. Dr. Morrison translated, his voice shaking. That which is, the subtle essence, all this has that as its soul. That is reality. That is the self. That art thou. It was a passage from the Chandogya Upanishad, one of the oldest Hindu scriptures. The third emission was in ancient Hebrew, biblical Hebrew. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The Shema, the central prayer of Judaism. The fourth was in classical Arabic, Quranic Arabic from the 7th century. In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of all the worlds. The opening of the Quran. The fifth was in ancient Greek, Koine Greek. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. John 3:16, possibly the most quoted verse in Christianity. One after another, emission after emission, each one a sacred text from a major world religion. Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Sikhism, texts so holy that billions of people had based their entire lives around them. And they were being broadcast from a dead moon a billion miles away. But that wasn't the part that broke us. Not really. We could have processed that, eventually. Could have built theories around why an alien intelligence might broadcast human religious texts. Maybe it was communication, showing us they'd studied our cultures. Maybe it was a greeting, using words they knew were important to us. We could have rationalized it. What we couldn't rationalize was what Dr. Morrison discovered when he started comparing the broadcast to the original texts. He pulled up the Aramaic emission, the Gospel of John passage, and displayed it next to the canonical Greek text that appears in every Bible. Look at this, he said, his voice hollow. The Greek text we have, the version that's been preserved for 2,000 years, it's John 1:1, one verse. But the Aramaic version from STO1, when I translate it fully, it's longer. It includes 2 additional sentences that don't appear in any surviving manuscript. He displayed his translation on the main screen. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made, both seen and unseen, both temporal and eternal. And the Word observed all that was made and recorded it, so that nothing would be forgotten when the end comes. The room felt like the air had been sucked out of it. Dr. Morrison continued, pulling up more comparisons. The Upanishad passage. The version we have on Earth ends with, "That art thou." But the Sanskrit from ST01 continues for another full paragraph. It describes a cosmic observer, a witness to all existence, who preserves the memory of all souls and all beliefs. The Shema, from the Hebrew Bible, we know it as one line. The version from ST01 has 4 additional lines describing how God's oneness extends across time, how the divine observes and records every prayer ever spoken. The Quranic passage includes verses that aren't in the Quran we know, verses about Allah's eternal documentation of human faith. Every single emission, every single sacred text, it's a complete version, a version we've never seen, a version that includes passages about observation, documentation, preservation, and a coming judgment. He looked around at all of us, his face a mask of terror. These aren't the texts as humans wrote them. These are the original versions, the complete versions, the versions before they were corrupted or lost or edited by human hands. ST01 has the source material, the original revelation before it passed through human interpretation. Dr. Graves had to sit down. I'd never seen him show weakness before, but this broke through whatever armor he'd built around himself. "How?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "How could ST-01 have original versions of texts that were written thousands of years after the moon was carved? Unless..." He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. But I could finish it. We all could. Unless the texts hadn't been written by humans at all. Unless they'd been given to humans, revealed to us, dictated to us by something that had the originals stored on a moon that predated our existence. Unless every prophet, every holy man, every religious visionary in human history had been receiving transmissions from ST-01, downloading information that had been waiting there for billions of years, ready to be delivered when humanity evolved enough to receive it. The implications were staggering, terrifying, reality-shattering. Every religion on earth, every sacred text, every divine revelation, they might all be real. Not metaphorically real, not spiritually real, but literally real. Broadcasting from a moon in Saturn's orbit, transmitted across space, and somehow received by human minds that interpreted them as the voice of God. Dr. Chen had been quiet throughout all of this, but now she spoke up, her voice shaking. "I need to play you something else. An emission we received this morning. The 13th pulse." She pulled up the audio file. "It's different from the others. It's longer. And it's not in one language. It's in all of them." She pressed play. What came through the speakers was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It started in Aramaic, then shifted to Sanskrit, then Hebrew, then Arabic, then Greek, cycling through dozens of ancient languages, each phrase flowing seamlessly into the next. Dr. Morrison was frantically transcribing, his hands flying across his keyboard, but I could see tears streaming down his face as he worked. When the audio finally stopped, 7 minutes and 7 seconds later, he displayed his translation on the main screen. The words made my blood run cold. "To those who hear this message, the count approaches completion. For 4 billion years we have watched. We have recorded. We have preserved every prayer, every faith, every God you have believed in. They are all true. They are all false. They are all facets of what you cannot comprehend. When the count reaches 0, we return. We return to show you what you have been worshipping. We return to show you what you are. Prepare yourselves. The revelation comes in 90 days. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The weight of those words hung in the air like a physical presence, crushing us, suffocating us. 90 days. The countdown Dr. Graves had mentioned wasn't just an energy threshold. It was a deadline, an appointment. In 90 days, whatever had been documenting humanity's religions for 4 billion years was coming back to reveal something. Something about what we'd been worshipping, something about what we are. I thought about every religion on earth, every sacred text, every promise of salvation or damnation or enlightenment. I thought about the billions of people who believed, who prayed, who built their entire worldview around their faith. And I thought about what would happen if they found out that their gods, all of their gods, were just facets of something incomprehensible, something so vast and ancient that it had been watching humans worship it under different names for the entire span of our existence. The revelation that was coming in 90 days, it wouldn't just change humanity's understanding of religion, it would shatter it, and we had no idea if we'd survive the shattering. The emergency meeting was called at 3 a.m. None of us had slept after hearing that 13th transmission. How could we? We'd just received a message from something that claimed to have been watching humanity for 4 billion years. Something that said it was coming back in 90 days to reveal a truth that would apparently redefine everything we thought we knew about religion, about God, about ourselves. Dr. Graves had contacted someone higher up the chain of command, people I'd never heard of, agencies that didn't have names. They wanted answers. They wanted theories. They wanted us to explain the unexplainable. So we gathered in the conference room, exhausted and terrified, trying to make sense of something that broke every rule of reality we'd ever learned. The coffee was stronger than usual, bitter enough to strip paint, but none of us cared. We needed to be sharp. We needed to think, because in 90 days, everything was going to change, and we were the only people on Earth who knew it was coming. Dr. Morrison started the discussion, his voice hoarse from hours of translation work. Let's establish what we know for certain. ST-01 exists. It's real, it's physical, We have thousands of images proving it. The symbols carved on its surface are real. We've measured them, analyzed them, confirmed their age and origin. The emissions are real. We've recorded 12 complete cycles plus the 13th anomalous transmission. The audio messages are real. I've translated them, cross-referenced them, verified the linguistic structures. Everything we're seeing, everything we're hearing, it's not a hoax, it's not a glitch, it's not mass hallucination. Whatever ST-01 is, whatever intelligence created it, they're real. He paused, rubbing his eyes with the heels of his hands. So the question becomes, what is the purpose of ST-01? Why does it exist? Why document every human religion in such meticulous detail? He looked around the table at all of us, waiting for someone to offer an answer. Nobody did. Because the only answers we could think of were too terrifying to say out loud. Dr. Chen broke the silence, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I've been thinking about this from an archival perspective. What if ST-01 is exactly what it appears to be? A library, a repository, a backup of human religious knowledge created before that knowledge even existed on Earth. She pulled up a diagram on the main screen, a timeline stretching back billions of years. Think about how we preserve information. We make copies. We store them in multiple locations. We use redundant systems to ensure nothing is lost. What if someone, some intelligence, decided that human religious belief was worth preserving? That our gods, our faiths, our spiritual evolution was important enough to document and protect? She highlighted the 4.1 billion year mark on the timeline, where ST-01 was created. They built the archive first, before life even existed on Earth. They knew what religions we would create, what gods we would worship, what sacred texts we would write. And they preserved them on a moon far enough from Earth to survive any catastrophe that might destroy us. But why? Dr. Torres interjected, frustration clear in her voice. Why would anyone care about preserving human religion? We're talking about an intelligence capable of carving continent-sized symbols into a moon, of maintaining those symbols for billions of years, of predicting the entire religious evolution of a species that wouldn't exist for eons. That level of technology, that level of foresight, it's godlike. Why would something that powerful care about what gods humans believe in? She stood up, pacing. Unless our religions aren't about us at all. What if they're about them? What if every god we've ever worshipped, every divine being we've ever prayed to, they're all just different names for whatever built ST-01? What if we've been worshipping our observers this entire time without knowing it? The room went quiet again. That theory had been floating around unspoken for days, but hearing it said out loud made it real, made it possible, made it terrifying. I'd been quiet up until this point, just listening, trying to process, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. The question that had been burning in my mind since I heard those transmissions finally forced its way out. Does this prove that God exists? My voice sounded small in the large conference room. I mean, really think about what we're looking at here. Sacred texts that are complete, that include passages we've never seen, being broadcast from a moon that predates human civilization, religious symbols from every faith in history preserved with perfect accuracy billions of years before those faiths existed. Something that claims to have watched us, recorded us, preserved every prayer we've ever spoken. If that's not God, then what is it? I looked around at the team, at these brilliant scientists who'd spent their careers studying the universe through the lens of mathematics and physics. Are we saying God is real? Are we saying every religion was right? Or are we saying something worse? Dr. Graves had been sitting at the head of the table, fingers steepled, listening to all of us theorize and argue and panic. Now he leaned forward, and the look in his eyes was something I'd never seen before. Not fear, not confusion, something darker, something like resignation. Mitchell, you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether God exists. The question is, what does it mean for something to exist that can do what ST-01 does? He stood up, walking to the main screen where Dr. Chen's timeline was still displayed. Let me tell you what we know for certain. Something built ST-01 4 billion years ago. Something carved religious symbols from human history onto its surface before humans existed. Something maintained those symbols across geological time spans. Something encoded complete versions of our sacred texts into electromagnetic transmissions. Something is counting down to a revelation 90 days from now. He turned to face us. Does that prove God exists? No, Mitchell. It proves something worse. It proves that something knows about our religions. Something documented them before we had written language, before we had civilization, before we even evolved. Think about what that means, Dr. Graves continued, his voice getting harder, colder. For something to know what religions humanity would create billions of years before we created them, they would need to either predict the future with perfect accuracy, or they would need to control it. They would need to know that humans would evolve on Earth, that we'd develop language and culture and spirituality, that we'd create Christianity and Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and every other faith system. They would need to know the exact details of texts that wouldn't be written for billions of years. The only way that's possible is if they programmed it, if they designed human religious evolution. If every prophet who claimed to hear God's voice was actually receiving a transmission from ST-01, if every sacred revelation was downloaded from that moon and interpreted by human minds as divine inspiration. He let that sink in for a moment. The implications were staggering, overwhelming, reality-breaking. Dr. Morrison stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. No, that can't be right. That would mean free will is a lie. That would mean every spiritual experience in human history was manufactured. That would mean prophets and saints and holy men weren't inspired by the divine. They were just receivers picking up signals from a moon. That strips meaning from everything, from every prayer, every moment of faith, every religious experience billions of people have had across all of human history. His voice was rising, panic creeping in. My grandmother died believing she'd see God. My mother prays every night believing someone is listening. Are you telling me they were just talking to a fucking moon? That their entire faith, their entire framework for understanding suffering and meaning and purpose, it was all just programmed into them by some ancient intelligence that documented their religion before they were born? He was breathing hard, on the edge of breaking down completely. Dr. Chen moved to comfort him, but he waved her off. How do we tell people this? How do we explain that their gods might be real but not in any way they'd recognize? That they've been worshipping a catalog, a backup drive? I felt like I was going to be sick, because Dr. Graves was right. This didn't prove God existed. It proved something infinitely more disturbing. It proved that human religious experience, something we'd always thought of as organic, personal, emerging naturally from our consciousness and culture, might have been seeded, planted, programmed into us by an intelligence that wanted to preserve it. We weren't discovering God. We were discovering that we'd been an experiment, a project, something worth documenting but maybe not worth saving. The archive existed. The religions were preserved. But we, the people who believed in them, we were expendable. The backup existed because the original was expected to fail. That's why it's called a backup, I said quietly, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You only create a backup when you expect the original to be destroyed. ST-01 isn't preserving our religions because they're sacred. It's preserving them because we won't survive, because Earth won't survive. They made a backup of our gods because they know we're going to die, and they want to remember what we believed in before we're gone. The room erupted again. Dr. Torres was shaking her head violently. Dr. Chen had her face in her hands. Dr. Morrison was repeating no, no, no like a mantra, but Dr. Graves just stood there, nodding slowly. That's one interpretation, and it might be correct. Or maybe the backup exists because they plan to restore it. Maybe in 90 days they're not coming to judge us or destroy us. Maybe they're coming to restore the original versions of our religions, to correct what we got wrong, to show us what faith was supposed to be before human interpretation corrupted it. He pulled up the text of the 13th transmission again. Look at what it says. They are all true. They are all false. They are all facets of what you cannot comprehend. What if all religions are true simultaneously? What if God, Allah, Brahma, the Tao, the Buddha nature, they're all real, but they're all incomplete descriptions of something so vast that humans can only perceive fragments of it? What if ST-01 is trying to show us the complete picture, the full truth that we've been worshipping in pieces for all of human history? And what if we can't handle that truth? I asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. What if the revelation destroys us? What if knowing the complete nature of whatever ST-01 represents breaks the human mind? Religion works because it's comprehensible. It gives us frameworks we can understand, metaphors we can grasp. God as Father, God as Judge, God as infinite compassion. These are concepts humans can work with, but if the reality is something incomprehensible, something that exists outside our ability to process, then the revelation could shatter us. Every person of faith would have to confront the fact that they were right and wrong simultaneously, that their God is real but unrecognizable, that they've been worshipping something they can never understand. How does humanity survive that? Nobody had an answer, because there might not be an answer. In 90 days, something was coming. Something that had documented every human religion before those religions existed. Something that knew our prayers before we spoke them. Something that had been watching us for the entire span of our existence, preserving our faith like specimens in a jar. And it was going to reveal something to us. Something about what we'd been worshipping. Something about what we are. And we had no idea if that revelation would elevate us or destroy us. All we knew was that the countdown was ticking, and in 3 months, humanity was going to meet its makers, or its catalogers, or its executioners, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. It was Dr. Chen who found the numbers. We'd been so focused on the religious symbols, on the sacred texts being transmitted, on the philosophical implications of what ST01 represented, that we'd overlooked something fundamental, something that had been staring at us from the very first images of the moon's surface. She called another emergency meeting 2 days after our discussion about the backup theory, and when we assembled in the conference room, she looked like she hadn't slept at all. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands shaking as she pulled up new analysis on the main screen. "I went back to the original surface surveys," she said, her voice hollow. "The very first high-resolution images from Heimdall 7. I was looking at the sections between the religious symbols, the areas we'd written off as empty space or standard cratering, and I found something we missed. Something that was there all along, but we didn't recognize because we weren't looking for it." She zoomed in on a region between the massive Christian cross and an Islamic crescent. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just the normal gray terrain, some small impact craters, the usual texture of an ancient lunar surface. Then she enhanced the contrast and adjusted the lighting angle, and suddenly I could see them. Lines, structures, patterns that weren't random at all. "These are numbers," Dr. Chen said, her voice trembling. "Mathematical notation. Not human mathematics, but a universal system based on geometric ratios and prime number sequences. It's the kind of mathematical language SETI has theorized aliens might use because it transcends culture and language. Pure mathematics. The universal truth." She pulled up comparison images showing the structures next to Earth mathematical notation. "This symbol here represents the concept of unity, 1. This grouping represents the prime number sequence. This larger structure is an equation demonstrating the Pythagorean theorem. They're showing us they understand fundamental mathematics, establishing a baseline for communication. But that's not the important part." She zoomed out, showing the entire surface of ST01, and suddenly I could see what she'd discovered. The numbers weren't random, scattered notations. They were organized, sequential, covering vast sections of the moon's surface in a specific pattern. The entire northern hemisphere of ST01 is covered in numerical sequences, millions of them. And they're not demonstrating mathematical concepts. They're counting. They're counting down. Dr. Graves leaned forward, his face pale. "Explain." Dr. Chen pulled up a 3-dimensional model showing the numerical sequences she'd identified. "The numbers start at ST01's North Pole with an astronomically large value. I'm talking numbers in the trillions. Then, as you move south along meridian lines, the numbers decrease, sequentially, consistently. Every meridian line is a countdown sequence, all of them synchronized, all of them decreasing at the same rate. When they reach the equator, they converge at a specific value, and south of the equator, they continue counting down towards 0. She highlighted a region near the South Pole. "This area here, this is where the countdown approaches its final values. And based on the progression rate, based on the mathematical intervals between values, I can calculate when this countdown began and when it will reach 0. She paused, her hand hovering over the keyboard. "The countdown started approximately 4.1 billion years ago, right when ST01 was created, and it reaches 0 in exactly 88 days from today." The room went silent. Not the shocked silence we'd experienced before, but something deeper. The silence of realization, of pieces clicking into place, of understanding something you wish you could ununderstand. Dr. Morrison was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. "So, the transmission's starting 3 months ago. The energy pulse is increasing every 7 days. It's not random. It's synchronized with the countdown. ST-01 has been counting down for 4 billion years, and 3 months ago it entered its final phase. The transmissions are a warning, a notification, like an alarm clock that starts making noise as it approaches the set time. He looked at Dr. Chen. "You're certain about the timeline? 88 days? She nodded. "I've checked it against multiple measurement systems. I've had Dr. Torres verify the mathematics independently. The countdown is absolute. It's been running for 4.1 billion years with precision that shouldn't be possible, and it will reach zero on January 14th, 2025 at approximately 11:47 p.m. Universal Time. That's when whatever ST-01 was built for, whatever purpose it serves, that's when it activates." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. We'd known something was coming in 3 months, but knowing it was a countdown that had been running for billions of years, that made it real in a way that was suffocating. "How do you count down for 4 billion years?" I asked, my mind struggling with the concept.
How do you maintain that kind of precision across geological time, across stellar evolution? The sun was younger when this countdown started. The Earth was still molten. The galaxy was in a different configuration. How do you keep a countdown accurate through all of that? Dr. Torres spoke up from her workstation. "You'd need a clock more accurate than anything we can build. More accurate than atomic clocks, than pulsar timing. You'd need to be measuring time against something fundamental. Something that doesn't change regardless of stellar drift or gravitational variations or relativistic effects. You'd need to be measuring against the expansion of the universe itself, against cosmic time." She pulled up equations I barely understood. "The countdown isn't measuring seconds or years. It's measuring cosmological epochs, units of time based on universal constants that have been steady since the Big Bang. That's the only way you could maintain accuracy across 4 billion years." Dr. Pai. Graves stood up and walked to the screen showing the countdown sequences. He traced one of the meridian lines with his finger, following the numbers as they decreased toward zero. "So someone built this moon 4.1 billion years ago, carved our religions onto its surface billions of years before we'd create them, set up a countdown synchronized to cosmic time, and programmed it to reach zero on a specific date in January 2025. Why? What's special about that date? What happens when the countdown reaches zero?" Nobody answered because nobody knew. We could speculate, theorize, build models, but the truth was we had no idea what would happen in 88 days. Would ST-01 explode? Would it open? Would something emerge from it? Would it transmit a final message? Would whatever created it return? The possibilities were endless, and all of them were terrifying. "We need to figure out the significance of the date, Doctor," Graves said, moving into command mode. "January 14th, 2025. Is there any astronomical significance? Any alignment of planets? Any cultural or religious significance we're missing?" Dr. Morrison was already searching through historical and religious databases. "January 14th doesn't correspond to any major religious holiday. It's not a solstice or equinox. No significant astronomical events are predicted for that date. As far as I can tell, it's arbitrary from a human perspective." He paused, scrolling through more data. Unless the significance isn't about what happens on Earth that day. What if the significance is about how long the countdown has been running? What if the 4.1 billion years is the important number? Dr. Chen caught on immediately. "The Earth is 4.54 billion years old. So ST-01 was created about 440 million years after Earth formed. That's right around the time Earth's surface cooled enough to allow liquid water. Right around the time conditions became suitable for life. What if the countdown started when Earth became habitable? What if it was always meant to measure how long it took us to reach a certain point in our evolution?" She pulled up a timeline of Earth's history. 4.1 billion years ago, countdown starts. 3.5 billion years ago, first life emerges. 540 million years ago, Cambrian explosion, complex life. 300,000 years ago, modern humans. 10,000 years ago, civilization. Today, countdown reaches zero. What if this is a test? What if they wanted to see how far we'd evolve in 4.1 billion years? And January 14th, 2025 is when they come to check the results, or when they come to collect, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. Think about it. You don't set a timer for billions of years just to check on progress. You set a timer for something permanent, something final, like an expiration date. What if Earth was seeded with life 4 billion years ago as an experiment, and the countdown is when the experiment ends, when they harvest the results, when they judge whether we passed or failed?
The room temperature seemed to drop. Dr. Torres shook her head. No, that doesn't fit with the transmissions. If they were just going to destroy us or harvest us or whatever, why broadcast our sacred texts? Why show us they've been preserving our religions? Why give us any warning at all? She stood up, agitated. Unless the warning is the test. Maybe the final phase of the experiment is seeing how we react to knowing, how humanity responds to discovering that our religions were documented before we created them, how we handle the existential crisis of learning we've been observed for our entire evolutionary history. Maybe that's the data they want, our reaction to the revelation. Dr. Graves pulled up the 13th transmission again, the one that said, "We return to show you what you have been worshiping. We return to show you what you are." The message says they're coming to show us something, to reveal something. That implies they want us to know. They want us to understand. But understand what? He read the message again, parsing each word. They are all true. They are all false. All facets of what you cannot comprehend. What if the countdown reaching 0 is when we finally become capable of comprehending? What if 4.1 billion years of evolution, of developing consciousness and language and mathematics and spirituality? What if that was all necessary preparation for understanding whatever truth they're about to reveal? He looked around at all of us. What if we're not being judged? What if we're being upgraded? What if the countdown is when humanity graduates to the next level of existence and they come to facilitate that transition? It was a hopeful interpretation, maybe too hopeful, but it was better than the alternatives. Dr. Morrison wasn't convinced. Or what if the countdown is when they delete the backup? Think about it. They've preserved our religions on ST-01 for billions of years. Every prayer, every sacred text, every god we've worshipped, it's all there in the archive. But why preserve it if we still exist? Why keep a backup if the original is still running? Maybe the countdown is when they decide we've deviated too far from the original design, when our religions have become too corrupted, too different from what they intended. So they come back, delete the failed experiment, and use the backup to start over. Maybe that's why the message says they'll show us what we've been worshipping. They're going to show us the original versions of our faiths, the pure, untainted versions from billions of years ago, right before they erase us and restore from backup. His words hung in the air like a death sentence, because it made horrifying sense. You don't maintain a backup for 4 billion years unless you expect to use it eventually. And you don't use a backup unless the original has failed. I walked to the window, even though there was no window 400 feet underground, just a concrete wall that might as well have been the boundary of the universe. 88 days, I said, my voice distant. In 88 days we'll know. We'll know if this is first contact or extinction, ascension or deletion, revelation or apocalypse. And there's nothing we can do to stop it. We can't reach ST-01. We don't have spacecraft capable of making it to Saturn in less than 3 months. We can't destroy it even if we wanted to. We can't communicate with it except to listen to its transmissions. We're completely powerless. All we can do is watch the countdown tick down to 0 and wait to see what happens when it does. I turned back to face the team. So what do we do? Do we tell people? Do we warn humanity that in 88 days something is coming? Something that's been watching us for 4 billion years, something that has the complete versions of our sacred texts and claims all religions are simultaneously true and false? Do we cause worldwide panic and the collapse of every religious institution? Or do we stay silent, keep working, and hope that when the countdown reaches 0, whatever happens is something we can survive? The question hung there, unanswered, because there was no good answer. There was only the countdown, ticking away, second by second, cosmic epoch by cosmic epoch, drawing us inevitably toward January 14th, 2025, when everything would change, when the backup would either save us or replace us. And we were powerless to do anything but watch it happen. They came for us on a Tuesday morning. I remember because I was in the middle of analyzing the rate of energy increase in ST-01's emissions, trying to model what would happen when the countdown reached 0, when the power cut out. Not just the lights, everything. Computers, ventilation, the hum of servers that had been constant background noise for months. All of it went silent in an instant. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the operations center in red, and that's when I heard the boots. Heavy boots, multiple sets, coming down the corridors toward us. Dr. Graves stood up from his workstation, his face resigned, like he'd been expecting this. Everyone stay calm. he said quietly. Don't resist. Don't argue. Just comply with whatever they tell you. The doors burst open, and armed personnel flooded in. Not military, or at least not any military branch I recognized. They wore black tactical gear with no identifying patches, no insignia, nothing that would tell you who they worked for. They moved with precision, fanning out through the operations center, securing every person at their workstation. One of them, presumably the leader, approached Dr. Graves. Dr. Richard Graves, by order of Directive 447 Black, this facility is now under operational lockdown. All personnel are to cease work immediately and prepare for evacuation. All data, all equipment, all documentation related to Project Saturn Theta is hereby classified beyond cosmic clearance and subject to immediate seizure. Do you understand? Dr. Graves nodded slowly. I understand, but you need to know that we're in the middle of critical analysis. The countdown reaches 0 in 86 days. We need more time to... The leader cut him off. You don't need anything, Dr. Graves. Your work here is complete. The project is being transferred to a different division with higher classification authority. You and your team will be debriefed. Your security clearances will be suspended pending review, and you will be relocated to separate facilities for observation. Effective immediately. He gestured to his team and they began disconnecting our computers, seizing hard drives, confiscating tablets and notebooks. I watched as months of work, years of accumulated data, all of it was being packed into metal cases and carried away by people who wouldn't tell us their name. Dr. Chen tried to protest, reaching for her workstation as they dismantled. You can't just shut us down. We're the only people who understand this data. We're the only ones who've been tracking the progression. You need us. One of the tactical personnel stepped between her and her workstation, hand resting on his sidearm. She backed off immediately, hands raised, tears of frustration streaming down her face. They marched us out of the operations center in single file, like prisoners, through corridors I'd walked 100 times but now felt foreign, hostile. The facility that had been our home, our prison, our entire world for months was being systematically shut down. I could see other personnel in different sections being evacuated, everyone looking confused and frightened. When we reached the elevator bay, they separated us. Dr. Graves was taken aside by the leader, pulled into a side room for what they called executive debriefing. The rest of us were loaded into the industrial elevator in groups of 4, sent up to the surface under armed guard. I ended up in the elevator with Dr. Torres, Dr. Morrison, and Dr. Chen. None of us spoke during the ascent. What was there to say? Everything we'd worked for, everything we'd discovered, it was being taken from us, and the countdown was still running. In 86 days, something was going to happen, and apparently someone had decided we couldn't be trusted to be part of it anymore. At the surface, they had a bus waiting. Not a nice bus, a prison transport bus with barred windows and separate compartments. They loaded us in one by one, isolating us from each other. I caught Dr. Morrison's eye before they pushed him into his compartment. He looked terrified, more than terrified. He looked like a man who knew he was never going to see daylight again. The bus ride lasted hours. They'd put a hood over my head again, but I could feel the turns, the changes in road surface. We were being taken far from Site 77, dispersed to different locations. When they finally removed the hood, I was in a small room that looked like a hotel suite, if hotels were designed by people who'd only read about human comfort in a manual. Bed, desk, bathroom, small kitchenette. No windows. One door that I immediately knew would be locked from the outside. A man in a suit was waiting for me, sitting in the room's only chair. Not one of the tactical team. Someone different. Someone who looked like he spent his days behind a desk making decisions that destroyed lives. Captain Mitchell, he said, his voice pleasant, conversational. Please, sit on the bed. We need to have a discussion about your future. I sat, because what else was I going to do? The man opened a folder and began reading from it. You have been exposed to classified information beyond your clearance level. You have knowledge of Project Saturn Theta that is now deemed a national security risk. Under normal circumstances, this would result in immediate remediation. However, given your service record and your cooperation over the past months, we're prepared to offer you an alternative. He looked up from the folder, his eyes completely empty of empathy. You will be placed under permanent observation at a secure facility. You will have no contact with the outside world. You will not use phones, computers, or any communication device. You will not send letters. You will not see visitors. You will live out the remainder of your life in comfortable isolation, with your needs met, until such time as the information you possess is no longer classified or you are deceased, whichever comes first. In exchange, you get to live. Do you accept these terms? I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. You're imprisoning me because I know about ST-01. You're imprisoning all of us. He shrugged. We prefer the term protective custody, and it's not just you. Everyone on the team is receiving similar accommodations, some more comfortable than others, depending on their level of cooperation. What about Dr. Graves? I asked. The man's expression didn't change. Dr. Graves is receiving specialized debriefing. He had access to information beyond what was shared with the team. He knew more than you do, Captain Mitchell. Much more. And he'll be dealt with accordingly. The way he said dealt with made my blood run cold. You're going to kill him. The man closed the folder. I'm going to give you some advice, Captain. Don't ask questions about things that don't concern you anymore. Dr. Graves's situation is above your clearance, above your pay grade, and above your ability to influence. Focus on your own situation. You have a choice: comfortable isolation or uncomfortable alternatives. Choose wisely. He stood up, walked to the door, knocked twice. It opened immediately. Someone will bring you dinner in an hour. I suggest you eat well and think about how fortunate you are to still be breathing. Then he was gone, the door closing with a heavy metallic thunk that echoed like a coffin lid. I sat there on that bed for I don't know how long, trying to understand what had just happened. We'd been shut down, silenced, imprisoned, and from what the suit had implied, some of us might not even survive the shutdown. But why? Why now? We'd been working on ST-01 for months. The team had been studying it for 7 years, and suddenly we were too much of a risk. Unless they didn't need us anymore. Unless we'd served our purpose and now we were loose ends. I thought about what Dr. Graves had said during our discussions. How DSRU had no congressional oversight. How it didn't officially exist. How the project had been funded through black budget diversions. What if DSRU had never been about understanding ST-01? What if it had been about confirming something they already knew? What if someone higher up the chain had known about the countdown from the beginning, had known it was reaching zero, and had assembled our team just to verify the timeline, to confirm the transmissions, to validate what they'd discovered years ago? We weren't researchers, we were validators, and now that we'd validated everything, we were expendable. A horrible realization crept over me. I pulled out the small notepad I'd been allowed to keep, started writing down everything I could remember, the dates, the transmissions, the countdown timeline, the theories we'd developed. If they were going to bury this, if they were going to silence the team, then someone needed to know the truth. I couldn't let this die with us. I wrote for hours, filling page after page with cramped handwriting, documenting everything we'd discovered. When they brought dinner, a bland tray of institutional food, I hid the notepad under the mattress. The guard who delivered the food barely looked at me, just set the tray down and left. But I saw the camera in the corner of the room. Small, barely visible, but definitely there. They were watching, always watching. I'd have to be careful. The days blurred together in that room. No windows meant no natural light, no way to track time except by meal deliveries. 3 meals a day, regular as clockwork. No conversation, no human interaction beyond silent guards delivering food. I kept writing in the notepad, hiding it whenever I heard footsteps outside, documenting everything I could remember about ST-01. It became an obsession, the only thing keeping me sane. On what I estimated was day 6, they brought me a television. Small, old model, no internet connection, just basic cable. The guard who set it up didn't speak, but the message was clear. They wanted me occupied, distracted, docile. I watched the news, searching for any mention of astronomical anomalies, unusual NASA announcements, anything that might indicate the world knew about ST-01. Nothing. Everything was normal. Political scandals, economic reports, celebrity gossip. The world was continuing like nothing was wrong, oblivious to the fact that in less than 3 months, a countdown that had been running for 4 billion years was going to reach zero. And then I saw it. A brief news segment, barely 30 seconds long. Dr. Rebecca Torres, quantum physicist, had died in a car accident in rural Colorado. Single vehicle collision, driver lost control, no witnesses. My heart stopped. I knew Rebecca. She was one of the most careful people I'd ever met. Meticulous, precise, the kind of person who triple-checked everything. She wouldn't lose control of a car, but she would be eliminated if someone wanted her silenced. No witnesses, the news anchor had said. Of course, there were no witnesses. They'd made sure of that. 2 days later, another news segment. Dr. James Morrison, noted linguist and professor emeritus, found dead in his home from an apparent suicide. No note, no warning signs. Just a brilliant mind, suddenly gone. I felt sick. Morrison hadn't been suicidal. He'd been terrified, yes, but not suicidal. He'd wanted to live, wanted to understand, wanted to survive long enough to see what happened when the countdown reached 0. But now he was dead, labeled a suicide, his knowledge buried with him. The pattern was clear. They were cleaning up, eliminating everyone who knew about ST-01, everyone who could talk, everyone who could reveal the truth. I looked at the camera in the corner of my room and wondered when my turn would come. Would it be a car accident? A suicide? Maybe a heart attack in my sleep? Just another unfortunate tragedy? Nothing suspicious? I had maybe days, maybe hours, before they decided I was too much of a liability. The notepad under my mattress suddenly felt like a death warrant. If they found it, if they knew I was documenting everything, they'd accelerate my accident. But if I didn't document it, if I let the knowledge die with me, then what was the point of any of this? What was the point of discovering the truth if it died in a black site prison with no one ever knowing? That's when I decided to run. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have resources, but I had to try. Because in 80-something days, the countdown was going to reach 0, and humanity deserved to know what was coming. Even if they couldn't stop it, even if the revelation destroyed everything we thought we knew about God and faith and our place in the universe, people had a right to know. So I watched the guards' patterns, timed their rotations, noticed that meals came at the same times every day, delivered by the same 2 people, one slightly less alert than the other. I waited, planned, and when the opportunity came, when the less alert guard brought lunch and forgot to secure the door properly, I made my move. I'm not proud of what I did. I'm not a violent person, but I hit him hard enough to knock him unconscious, took his keys and his jacket, and walked out of that room like I belonged there. The facility wasn't Site 77. It was somewhere else, somewhere I didn't recognize, but it had the same layout. Underground corridors, security checkpoints, that same recycled air. I made it through 2 checkpoints using the guard's credentials before someone realized something was wrong. Then I ran, alarms blaring, shouts behind me, boots pounding. I found an emergency exit, burst through it into blinding daylight, and kept running. I stole a car from the parking lot, drove until I hit a highway, dumped the car, hitchhiked, used cash I took from the guard to buy a bus ticket, and now I'm here, in this motel room in Nevada, recording this, telling you everything, because they're coming for me, and when they find me, I'll disappear just like Torres and Morrison, just like the others probably have or will, but at least this will exist. At least someone will know. The countdown is at 80 days now, maybe less. I've lost track, and I don't know what happens when it reaches 0, but I know the people in charge. They're not trying to stop it. They're not warning anyone. They're just silencing everyone who knows, eliminating the evidence, preparing for something. And that terrifies me more than anything we found on ST-01. I need to tell you about what I found, what I saw in those last minutes before they shut us down. Because this is the part they killed for. This is the reason Torres and Morrison are dead. This is why they're hunting me right now. In the chaos of the shutdown, when the tactical team was flooding into the operations center and everyone was panicking, I did something stupid, something reckless, something that's probably going to get me killed, but I don't regret it. I grabbed a USB drive from my desk drawer, one of those encrypted military-grade drives we used for data transfer, and I started copying files. Not all of them. There wasn't time. But the most recent high-resolution images from ST-01, the ones that had just come in the day before, the ones I hadn't had a chance to fully analyze yet. I shoved the drive in my pocket while the guards were disconnecting Dr. Chen's workstation, and nobody noticed. In all the confusion, with people being marched out and equipment being seized, one small USB drive didn't register. I kept my hand in my pocket, clutching it like a lifeline, terrified they'd search me, but they didn't. They were too focused on securing the big stuff, the servers and hard drives and documentation. They missed the one thing that mattered most. When I escaped from that facility, when I stole the guard's jacket and his keys and ran like hell through those corridors, I had the USB drive with me. It was the only thing I took besides his cash and his credentials. Everything else, my personal belongings, my clothes, my phone, all of it stayed behind. But I had the drive. And once I was safe, Once I'd put enough distance between myself and whatever black site they'd been keeping me in, I found a 24-hour computer cafe in some nowhere town in Nevada, paid cash for an hour of computer time, plugged in the drive, and that's when I saw it. That's when I found what they'd been hiding. What maybe even Dr. Graves hadn't known, or maybe he had known and that's why they were giving him specialized debriefing, which is code for making him disappear permanently. The images on the drive were the latest batch from Heimdall 7, ultra-high-resolution scans of ST-01's South Polar region, the area where the countdown numbers converged towards zero, the area we'd been studying to understand what would happen when the countdown completed. But these images had been processed with a new filtering algorithm that Dr. Torres had developed, something that enhanced details that were barely visible in normal processing. And at the center of ST-01's South Pole, there was something we'd never seen before, something that couldn't be natural. Something that looked like it was waiting to open. I'm looking at the image right now on the laptop I bought with the guard's cash. It's zoomed in as far as the resolution allows, and I've enhanced it myself using free software, pushing the contrast and brightness until the details are almost painfully clear. At the exact south pole of ST-01, there's a circular formation. At first glance, it looks like a crater. It's approximately 50 kilometers in diameter, perfectly circular, with raised edges that catch shadows in a way that makes it stand out from the surrounding terrain. But it's not a crater. Craters have rough edges, irregular shapes. They show signs of impact dynamics and ejecta patterns. This doesn't. The edges are too smooth, too precise. And inside the circle, there are structures. Geometric patterns that form concentric rings, each ring covered in markings that look almost like circuitry, or maybe writing. 7 rings in total, each one smaller than the last, all of them converging toward a central point that's absolutely black in the images. Not shadowed black, not dark gray, pure black. Like it's not reflecting any light at all, like it's not there, like it's a hole, a void, an opening into somewhere else. I spent 3 hours at that computer cafe analyzing the image, zooming in on different sections, trying to understand what I was looking at. The concentric rings are covered in symbols. Not the religious symbols we'd found elsewhere on ST-01. These are different, more complex, more dense. It took me a while to recognize them because they're overlaid, multiple symbols occupying the same space in different layers. But once I saw the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. The rings contain text, written in every ancient human language simultaneously. Aramaic overlaid with Sanskrit, overlaid with ancient Greek, overlaid with Egyptian hieroglyphics, overlaid with cuneiform, and dozens of other scripts I couldn't even identify, all of them occupying the same physical space, all of them saying the same thing. I couldn't translate all of it. I'm not a linguist like Morrison was, God rest his soul, but I could translate enough. I could read the Aramaic and some of the Greek and a little bit of the Sanskrit from what Morrison had taught me during our months working together. And the message was clear. The message was unmistakable. The message was absolutely fucking terrifying. When the count terminates, we return. That was the first phrase. In Aramaic, it read, Kecht nagemar espiare NHDVR. In Sanskrit, Ganana samapt hone par, hum laute hain. In ancient Greek, Ratan teliosi katametrisis, epanerchometha. All saying the same thing, we return. Not, we will return, or we might return. Present tense, definitive, like it's already decided, like it's inevitable. The second phrase was worse. To judge what has been made. In every language, the same message. Judgment, not observation, not communication, not friendly first contact. Judgment. Whatever built ST-01, whatever has been watching us for 4 billion years, whatever documented our religions before we created them, they're coming back to judge us, to judge humanity, to judge what we've done with the time we've had. And the third phrase, the one that made my hands shake so badly I almost couldn't hold the mouse, the one that confirmed my worst fears. The faithful will be preserved. The corrupt will be erased. The cycle will begin again. I sat there in that computer cafe, surrounded by teenagers playing video games and college students writing papers, all of them oblivious to what I was looking at, to what was written on a moon 1 billion miles away, and I felt my entire worldview shatter for the second time. The first time was when I learned about ST-01's existence. The second time was reading those words. Because they meant everything we'd theorized, everything we'd feared, it was all true. ST-01 wasn't just an archive. It wasn't just a library or a backup or a documentation project. It was a test. Humanity had been given 4.1 billion years to evolve, to develop, to create civilizations and religions and technologies, and at the end of that time, we would be judged. The countdown wasn't measuring time until first contact. It was measuring time until Judgment Day, and the judges were coming. The ones who had watched us since before we existed. The ones who knew what gods we would worship before we worshipped them. The ones who had the complete, uncorrupted versions of our sacred texts, because they had written them, or dictated them, or transmitted them to human minds across the ages. They were coming back, and they were going to separate the faithful from the corrupt, the preserved from the erased. But here's the part that keeps me awake at night, the part that's worse than the judgment, worse than the erasure, worse than anything. That last phrase, the cycle will begin again. Not a cycle, not this cycle, the cycle, implying it's happened before, implying this isn't the first time. What if Earth wasn't the first experiment? What if there have been other worlds, other civilizations, other species given billions of years to evolve and then judged when the countdown reached zero? What if STO1 isn't unique? What if there are other moons around other planets in other star systems, all of them covered in the religious symbols of extinct civilizations, all of them counting down to their own judgment days? What if this is what they do? What if we're just the latest iteration in a cycle that's been running since the universe began? Create life, watch it evolve, document its religions, wait for the countdown to complete, judge it, erase the failures, preserve the successes, start over. An eternal cycle of creation and destruction. And we're next. We're 80-something days away from our turn, from our judgment, from finding out if humanity passes or fails whatever criteria they've set. I copied the image onto this laptop. I've backed it up in 3 different locations, encrypted it, sent copies to anonymous email accounts, because this image, this message, this is what they don't want anyone to see. The religious symbols, fine, those can be explained away or classified. The transmissions with the sacred texts, those can be buried, dismissed as hoaxes if they ever leak. But this circular structure at the South Pole that looks like it's going to open when the countdown reaches zero, this message about judgment and erasure and cycles beginning again, this proves that we're not in control of our own destiny. This proves that everything humanity has ever believed, every religion, every god, every promise of salvation or damnation, it was all part of a test we didn't know we were taking. And the test is almost over. The proctors are coming back to grade our papers. And I don't think we're going to pass. I think that's why they shut down DSRU. I think that's why they're killing everyone who knows. Because if people found out, if humanity learned that in less than 3 months we're going to be judged by entities that have been watching us since before we could think, there would be chaos, panic, the collapse of every social structure we've built. Why follow laws if judgment is coming? Why maintain civilization if we're all going to be erased? Better to keep it secret. Better to let humanity live its last few months in ignorance. Better to silence anyone who might spoil the surprise. I've studied the circular structure for hours now, trying to see if there's anything else, any other clues about what's going to happen when it opens. And I think I found something. It's subtle, barely visible even with enhancement, but there are lines radiating out from the central black circle, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, extending across ST-01's surface like spokes on a wheel, connecting the portal, if that's what it is, to every major religious symbol on the moon, like they're all linked, like they're all channels for something. And I think I know what. When the countdown reaches zero, when that portal opens, whatever's on the other side is going to use those channels. It's going to broadcast, not electromagnetic transmissions like we've been receiving. Something else, something that will reach across space directly into human consciousness. Because that's how the revelations worked originally, right? The prophets didn't receive radio signals. They received visions, divine inspiration, direct downloads into their minds of information they couldn't possibly have known. What if that's what the portal does? What if when it opens, every human being on Earth simultaneously receives the revelation, the complete truth about what we've been worshiping, the full uncorrupted understanding of the divine, the knowledge of whether we've passed or failed? And what if that knowledge is too much? What if, Doctor? Graves was right when he theorized that the complete truth might break the human mind. What if the revelation, the actual unfiltered understanding of what ST01 represents, and what created it, and what we are in relation to it, what if that's not something human consciousness can process? We've been worshipping fragments, facets, incomplete pieces of something vast. Christianity sees one aspect, Islam another, Hinduism another, Buddhism another. All of them true, all of them false, all of them partial glimpses of something incomprehensible. But what happens when we see the whole thing? What happens when the fragments reassemble into the complete picture? Do we ascend to some higher level of understanding? Or do we shatter like glass under pressure? I think about the message. The faithful will be preserved. The corrupt will be erased. What does faithful mean to an intelligence that documented all faiths simultaneously? Faithful to which God? Faithful to which interpretation? Or is faithfulness something else entirely? Maybe it's not about which religion you followed. Maybe it's about whether you had faith at all, whether you believed in something beyond yourself, whether you maintained hope and meaning and purpose in a universe that often seems designed to crush those things. Maybe that's the test. And maybe that's why they preserved all religions equally on ST01, because they're all valid paths. They're all different languages describing the same indescribable truth. And the faithful are those who spoke any of those languages with genuine belief. But if that's true, then what happens to people like me? People who spent most of their lives not believing. I was the skeptic, the materialist, the guy who thought God was a fairy tale and the universe was just physics playing out according to mathematical rules. I didn't have faith. I had data. I had evidence. I had peer-reviewed research. And now I'm staring at proof that something divine, or at least something so advanced it might as well be divine, has been watching humanity since before we existed. Does that count? Does having proof eliminate the need for faith? Or does it disqualify me? Am I corrupt because I demanded evidence? Am I going to be erased when the judgment comes because I couldn't believe without seeing? The irony is killing me. I spent my whole life not believing, and now I'm going to die. Maybe be erased from existence because I finally found proof. Because I looked into the face of something incomprehensible and tried to understand it instead of just having faith that it was good, that it was benevolent, that it had humanity's best interests at heart. But I don't know if it does. I don't know if the judges coming in 80-something days are going to save us or destroy us. And I don't know if there's anything we can do to influence the outcome. The test is already over. The countdown is already running. The judgment is already decided. All we can do is wait. I don't have much time left. I can feel it. That instinct you develop when you've been in combat zones, when you've worked in classified facilities where one wrong move means disappearing forever. That animal sense that tells you predators are close. They've found me, or they're about to. I've been in this motel room for 36 hours now, and I've seen the same sedan pass by the window 4 times. Different drivers each time, but the same car. They're circling, watching, waiting for the right moment. Maybe they're listening to this recording right now through devices I can't detect. Maybe they already know everything I'm about to say, but I have to say it anyway. I have to get this out there before they silence me like they silenced Torres and Morrison and probably the others. Before I become another tragic accident, another unexplained suicide, another person who knew too much and paid the price. So I'm recording this. I'm uploading it to every platform I can think of. I'm scheduling it to post automatically if I don't cancel the upload within 12 hours. And if you're hearing this, if you're watching this, if this video or audio or text somehow made it through whatever censorship they're going to throw at it, then it means I failed to cancel it. It means they got to me. It means I'm gone. My name is David Mitchell. I'm 38 years old. I was an aerospace engineer. I worked for a division of NASA that doesn't officially exist, studying something that will change everything you think you know about reality, about religion, about humanity's place in the universe. And I'm probably dead by the time you hear this. But before I die, before they erase me and bury this information and continue pretending everything is normal, I need you to know what's coming. I need you to understand that in less than 80 days from when I'm recording this, everything changes. The countdown reaches 0. The portal opens. They return. And humanity gets judged by something that's been watching us since before we existed. You might think I'm crazy. You might think this is fiction, some elaborate hoax, creative writing designed to get views and comments and engagement. I wish it was. God, I wish I was just some conspiracy theorist making shit up for attention. But I'm not. I have the data. I have the images. I've attached them to this upload. Encrypted files that you can verify, analyze, confirm. The moon is real. ST-01 is real. The countdown is real. And if you have the resources, if you have access to powerful enough telescopes, you can see it yourself. It's there, orbiting Saturn, covered in religious symbols and counting down to Judgment Day. Look, I know how this sounds. I was the skeptic. I was the guy who rolled his eyes at UFO videos and ancient alien theories and people who claimed the government was hiding contact with extraterrestrials. I believed in science, in data, in peer-reviewed research and reproducible results. And everything I'm telling you, it violates everything I thought I knew about how the universe works. But the evidence is overwhelming, undeniable. Something built a moon 1 billion years ago and carved every human religion onto its surface before humans existed. Something transmitted complete versions of our sacred texts in dead languages. Something is counting down to a specific date when they return to judge whether humanity passes or fails their test. And our governments know. They've known for years. They've been studying it, analyzing it, trying to understand it. And their response wasn't to warn people. Their response was to bury it, to classify it beyond top secret, to kill anyone who might reveal it. Because they've decided that humanity can't handle the truth, that the knowledge would cause too much chaos, too much panic, too much disruption to the social order they've built. Better to let everyone live their last few months in ignorance. Better to let the revelation come as a surprise when the countdown hits 0, and whatever's on the other side of that portal broadcasts directly into every human mind on Earth. But I don't think we should be kept in the dark. I think people deserve to know, even if it causes panic, even if it disrupts everything, even if it means the collapse of governments and religions and social structures. Because maybe if we know what's coming, we can prepare, or at least we can choose how to spend our last few months. We can decide what's important. We can make peace with ourselves and each other. We can try to become whatever faithful means to the intelligence that's been documenting our religions for billions of years. I don't know if it will help. I don't know if anything we do in the next 80 days will influence the judgment. The test might already be over. The results might already be calculated. Maybe the judges already know which of us get preserved and which get erased. Maybe free will was always an illusion, and we've been following a script written 4 billion years ago. But I have to believe that awareness matters, that knowing the truth, even a truth this incomprehensible and terrifying, is better than living in comfortable ignorance. So that's why I'm telling you this. That's why I'm risking everything, throwing away any chance I might have had to survive, to get this information out there. Please, if you're listening to this, comment below where you are. Tell me your city, your country, what time it is when you're hearing this. Because if this goes viral, if it spreads far enough fast enough, they won't be able to contain it. They can silence me. They can erase this channel, delete this video, scrub this audio from every platform. But if enough people see it first, if enough people download it and share it and repost it, then the truth survives even if I don't. The truth becomes immortal. And maybe that's all I can hope for at this point. Not to survive, I gave up on that when I stole those files and ran from that black site prison. But to make sure the truth survives, to make sure someone, somewhere, knows what's coming. So comment, share this, download it, back it up, make copies. Spread it as far and as wide as you can before they take it down. Before they take me down. Because time is running out. Not just for me, but for all of us. The countdown is at 78 days now. Maybe 77. I've lost track of exact timing, but it's close. So close. And I don't know what happens when it reaches 0. None of us do. We can theorize, speculate, build models, but the truth is, we won't know until it happens, until that portal opens, and whatever's been waiting on the other side for 4 billion years finally comes through. What I do know is this. Something has been watching humanity since before we were human. Something documented every religion we would create before we created them. Something transmitted the original, complete versions of our sacred texts to prophets and holy men across all of human history. Something carved continent-sized symbols into a moon and maintained them for geological epochs. Something with technology and knowledge and patience that makes our entire civilization look like bacteria growing in a petri dish. And that something is coming back. Coming back to show us what we've been worshipping. Coming back to show us what we are. Coming back to separate the faithful from the corrupt, to preserve some and erase others, to end this cycle and begin the next. And maybe that's happened before. Maybe Earth isn't the first experiment. Maybe we're just the latest iteration in a process that's been running since the universe began. Create life, watch it evolve, document its beliefs, judge its worthiness, preserve the successes, erase the failures, start over. An eternal cycle, and our turn is in 78 days, maybe less. Maybe it's already started and we just don't know it yet. I keep thinking about that message on the portal. The faithful will be preserved, the corrupt will be erased, and I keep wondering what that means. What does faithful look like to something that documented all faiths simultaneously? Is it about following specific religious rules, about believing in the right God, about performing the right rituals and saying the right prayers? Or is it something deeper, something about maintaining hope and meaning and purpose, even when the universe seems designed to crush those things? Something about treating each other with compassion and dignity, even when it's easier to be cruel. Something about seeking truth even when the truth is uncomfortable. I don't know. I wish I did. I wish there was a clear rubric, a list of criteria, a way to know if you're going to pass the test. But there isn't. There's just faith. Blind faith that whatever's coming, whatever's been watching us for 4 billion years, has our best interests at heart, that the judges will be fair, that the preservation is real, and not just a comfortable lie to make the erasure easier to accept. And I don't know if I have that faith. Even now, even after everything I've seen, I'm still the skeptic, still the scientist, still the guy who needs evidence and data and proof. And maybe that's why I'm going to fail the test. Maybe that's why I'll be erased when the judgment comes. Because I couldn't just believe, I had to understand. And understanding might not be what they're looking for, but I'm telling you this anyway, even if it dooms me. Even if sharing this information makes me corrupt in their eyes, marks me for erasure, guarantees I won't survive what's coming. Because maybe you can do better. Maybe some of you have the faith I lack. Maybe some of you can look at this information, at the proof that something divine or divine adjacent has been watching us since before we existed, and instead of being terrified, you can find comfort. You can find validation. You can say, I knew it. I always knew something was out there. I always believed. And maybe that belief, that faith, maybe that's what saves you. Maybe that's what gets you preserved when the rest of us get erased. So use this information however you need to. If it strengthens your faith, good. If it makes you question everything, that's okay too. If it terrifies you, join the club. But don't ignore it. Don't pretend everything is normal. Don't spend the next 78 days living like nothing's changed, because everything has changed, or everything's about to change, and we need to be ready, or as ready as we can be for something we can't possibly comprehend. We need to figure out what faithful means and become that, if we can. We need to make peace with whatever's coming, and we need to hope that when the judges return, when they separate the preserved from the erased, we end up on the right side of that division. I can hear a car idling outside. Engine running but not moving. They're here, or they're about to be here. I've uploaded the files to every server I can think of, encrypted them with keys that will auto-release in 12 hours if I don't cancel them. The images of ST-01, the translations of the transmissions, the analysis of the countdown, the photo of the portal with its message about judgment and cycles and erasure. It's all out there now, all backed up, all ready to spread. And I can't cancel it anymore because I need to post this warning first. I need to make sure this recording gets out. So in about 5 minutes, if I'm right about the timing, those files are going to start appearing on message boards and file-sharing sites and anonymous servers all over the world. And then you'll have proof. You'll have evidence. You'll be able to verify everything I've told you. You'll be able to see the moon and the symbols and the countdown and the portal. And then you'll have to decide what to do with that information, whether to spread it or hide it, whether to prepare or pretend, whether to have faith or demand understanding. It's your choice now. I've done all I can. I've told you the truth. I've given you the evidence. The rest is up to you. Someone's knocking on the door. Heavy, deliberate knocking. The kind that means they're not asking permission. They're announcing arrival. This is it. This is how it ends for me. But not for the truth. The truth survives. The truth gets out. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all I was supposed to do. Be the messenger. Be the warning. Be the person who saw too much and told everyone even though it cost him everything. So comment below. Tell me where you are. Tell me you heard this. Tell me the truth made it through, because they're coming in now. I can hear the door handle turning, and I need to know that this wasn't for nothing, that someone, somewhere, knows what's coming. That humanity won't face the judgment completely blind, that we'll have some warning, some preparation, some chance to become whatever faithful means before the countdown reaches 0 and the portal opens and they return to judge us. Please, comment, share. Remember, don't let them bury this. Don't let them pretend I never existed or that ST01 isn't real or that the countdown isn't running. Because it is. It's running right now. Every second bringing us closer to judgment. And we need to be ready.